Welcome to COIQ, where you learn how health innovators maximize their success. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy, founder of Legacy DNA and international best-selling author of How Health Innovators Maximize Market Success. Through candid conversations with health innovators, early adopters, and influencers, you'll learn how to bring your innovation from idea to startup to market domination. And now, let's jump into the latest episode of COIQ. Welcome back, COIQ listeners. On today's episode, I have the CEO of Mortarum Technologies with me. Welcome, David Huizenga.
Hi, it's nice to talk with you.
It's nice to have you on the show, David. So, like I do with every episode, tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do, just to kind of set the conversation.
Sure. So I am currently CEO of Mortarum Technologies, which is a company that helps chronic patients sort of move more and move better through remote physical therapy solutions. Prior to that, I started out as a scientist. I was actually in a Origin of Life biochemistry lab, and most of our projects were funded through Hearst Pharmaceuticals. So I had sort of gone through the patenting process a lot with them, and that got me really excited about law school and what the patent attorneys were doing with my projects as I was going through. And so I ended up in law school, and eventually I was a patent attorney for a number of years and ran one of the larger firms in the Southeast. Was on the executive committee for that for quite a while. Needle and Rosenberg was the name of the firm at the time, but eventually I started migrating out of law towards commercialization of technologies. My first move out of law back into science was as chief technology officer for an antiviral company called Xyrus, and we had a platform that identified host targets that could become drug targets for viral interventions. And then I moved from there into an accelerator. I formed an accelerator company and raised money around that. And we accelerated mostly med tech type technologies. And that has led me now to my current position as CEO of Mortarum.
I would guess that you are a lifetime learner.
Yeah.
Passionate about learning.
You get to a certain spot and you learn that really everything that you do during the day is about learning. And so it's good I love learning. I'm rare in this case. I love law school. And I love sort of how it helped me sort of pivot the way I thought a little bit after being a scientist, and I loved being a scientist. So being a student is a good profession.
Exactly. I completely concur. So, obviously a lot has changed since we had our first conversation a few months ago when we were supposed to meet at HIMSS, and clearly that didn't happen.
No.
And it feels like 3 years.
It does, man. It feels like a lifetime in some ways, huh?
Yeah.
And in some ways, it really is true. I mean, I think the world when we had our first conversation, the world then will not be the world at this time next year.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Yeah.
So, what I want to do here is kind of have a before and after, or before and during conversation, right? So let's talk about what you were doing before COVID, and, let's talk about some of the, strategies and tactics that you had deployed as part of your commercialization process, and what was leading to success, what were you struggling with, just kind of paint that whole process and where you were prior to COVID.
Yeah, for sure. And in some ways, I think we're on the same track that we were on, and in others, certainly things are different. One of the sort of key moments in any early stage life science company is that sort of cross from where you go from clinical trials or sort of technology development, and you cross over into launch, and you launched your product, and that, you know, for us, launch sort of means the final delivery of that first product. And we had started the process. So inside of Mataram, our first product, you know, we're sort of a unique company in the way that we got formed, because our first product and technology was based on technology near you, actually, out of the University of South Florida, from Dr. Kyle Reed's lab. And it was a device that helped hemiparetic stroke survivors relearn how to walk. And it allowed them to rewire their brains to have a different gait. And that different gait, even up to 25 years post-stroke, was a gait that helped them walk faster and walk safer. And that was what our company was formed on, and we had done an initial clinical trial on that. But we learned during that process of that first clinical trial, and through customer discovery around the stroke survivors, as well as clinicians and others, that we needed to sort of expand the way that technology was used, because our original goal was to use that device in the home setting to allow survivors to get better at their own pace in the comfort of their home. And to do that, we needed to add sensing technology so that we were able to monitor how much they were using it, when they were using it, and if by using it they were actually getting better, right? If they were going to be disengaged from a clinical facility.
Yep. Yeah, especially if you don't have your eye on them.
Exactly. Exactly. And then in addition, we realized that we needed to sort of wrap around that a telehealth and an engagement platform that allowed them to stay connected to the clinicians who had delivered that device to them. And so we acquired 2 other technologies that were well through their sort of the commercialization strategy. And then starting in about June, we took that device that was close to being ready to go to market for launch, and we combined it with these other 2 technology platforms. And we had completed that process in sort of what we were looking at as a beta launch by mid-November. And so we started taking orders for the device in mid-November. And one of the things that we were doing at that time was we had made the decision that through our beta launch, we were going to have physical trainers in the homes with the patient. We referred to these as concierge.
Yep.
And it was going to help us make sure that they were able to use the device appropriately, make sure that the data that we had collected around the safety of the device was accurate, and sort of make sure that in the initial launch period, there was some additional oversight. So we did that and got through that process. Actually, you know, had some growing success through November and December and January. And come beginning of March, around, you know, beginning to end of March, we had patients that were using the device, having lots of success through this beta world, but we no longer could send our concierges into their homes.
Yeah.
For safety reasons.
Yep.
And so that's an example of we had a plan. You know, we were moving and executing on that plan before COVID. We would almost assuredly still be executing on that plan if it wasn't for COVID. But because of COVID, we had to pivot. And the way that we pivoted was we sort of took a moment with those concierges, and then we pivoted into an IRB approved clinical study around telehealth. And so instead of now sending those patients directly or sending that concierge into their home, we were enrolling the patients who had been there now, and we were monitoring them through without sending the concierge into their home, but with doing it over telemedicine. And now the rest of our devices, and we've pivoted, and so the only way that we're delivering devices now is for patients who are able to perform and use the device in a telehealth capacity. So yeah, so it's for us, we were moving down one path, Roxy, that had us sort of just making sure that all that we thought was correct, or after launch. But the whole plan had been to be a remote device for patient usage in the home without having concierge there. And so what COVID did is it just pivoted us a little bit quicker. Pivoted us quicker towards that than what we might have otherwise done.
So David, I would say that you are in really good company. Many of our listeners are CEOs that may have been at different points in their innovation process, but nonetheless have some common experience with what I had before and what do I have now, and oh my gosh, what do I have in a couple of months from now. So if you don't mind, let's just be really honest. Like, what was that like, when you first figured out that HIMSS was going to be canceled? And this was not something that was like, oh, and it's just going to be rescheduled in a couple of weeks, right? And there's this major, global pandemic happening. What was that like for you, both personally and professionally? What were you thinking and experiencing?
Yeah, wow. That's a good pivot on your for you too, because I wasn't exactly expecting that question. That's good. You get a real answer. So I think actually, I come. So the company I was in, I've been affiliated with a lot of DARPA grants and Homeland Security grants in my previous stint as the Chief Technology Officer for Xyrus. I know a bit more than I suppose most around viruses and pandemics and those things, because that's what our company had been built on.
Right.
I'm in contact with most of those people that were there. While I've moved into different technology spaces, many of them are still in it. And so I think probably quicker than most, I felt fear. I knew, that from the data that you could see that was coming out, there were parts of this that the expression of this particular coronavirus could be particularly difficult to control, and had the ability, the chance of becoming a pandemic, which we've never really had. Right? We've had these chances, but at least in my lifetime, we've never really had something like this. And so I think my initial thing was fear, and trying to make my family safe and figure out how to both navigate all that and make sure that my team, my professional teams were safe. And we started adjusting quickly what we were doing and how we were interacting as a team. And then once your personal world is safe, at least in the realms that I'm in, once everybody's personal world is as buttoned down as possible, then we sort of got back to rolling our sleeves up and making sure that the mission that we had each day before with our company was still the mission that we had today, which is to help chronic care patients in their home move more. and how would we do that? And so we've, you know, yeah, and that is actually changing on a daily basis. You know, let me, if it's okay, you know, we also, you know, we had another product that was further out in our pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more of an enterprise expression of our software portal and the clinical version of the portal and the treatment modalities for home use across all sorts of physical therapy needs and you know, sensors for helping facilities monitor their let's say the falls risk across all of their patients, right? On a daily or weekly basis. Out of the 50 patients that I'm seeing, who's got the highest fall risk and who has the lowest falls risk, for example. That wasn't going to be launched until Q4, Q1. So Q4 of this year, Q1 of next year. But we moved that up in a beta version because we were being asked by our partners and things, hey, when can this start working, and when could we turn this on? Because in the physical therapy realm, which is obviously a subset of the healthcare needs, it was absolutely, I mean, many of our partners, they're laying off 70 to 80% of their physical therapists and they're trying to find ways to still help the patients who they were helping before. So.
Yeah. You know, the social distancing, you know, is definitely a barrier to a lot of that hands-on care that we were accustomed to. And like you said, you know, was part of our, you know, business model to begin with. You know, so I imagine you, like most of the health innovators that I've spoken to, that, you know, this is it's a very dynamic situation, and it's an emotional roller coaster, right? You know, some days we're feeling like, I got this. And other days we're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to survive this? How is my business going to survive this? You know, what were some of the conversations like, just leading your team?
Yeah, you know, I think, yeah, so one of the first conversations, you know, we had was, look at, we're relevant, we're important, we have a mission that is as important today as it was before, and possibly more important, right? So don't lose sight of that fact, and helping them stay on task with, you know, sort of a mantra that we talk about all the time. You know, when you work for a healthcare company, and in particular when you work for our company, you know, you need to know that the reason you get up and the reason you come to work is to make somebody's life better. It's about helping people, and it's about the person at the end of our technology. It's not about the technology per se. And so that doesn't change, and so we talked about that, and we kept people focused on that. And then we talked about the things that we were doing to sort of shore things up. So, you know, you go through cost-cutting measures so that you make sure that your monies are able to last longer. You go through the things that you need to do that the government is providing you, for example, in this case, right? So things that they're hearing about. And so there's a lot of communication about how that is you know, how those loans are, you know, where we fit, or all those types of things. And, and then you, at least in our case, you know, we're like most small companies, you're constantly, you know, we're always fundraising. You have to be till you get to sort of a much later point in the sales cycle. And so I started communicating more to the team about the successes and the things that I and our senior management team was able to achieve and was achieving related to funding, so that they felt more secure.
Definitely.
You know, that there's a plan and that we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think the leadership skills or conversation is very different in this moment for all the reasons that you just described, right? A lot of us are here, just human beings. We want to make a difference in the world in our small way. And, to think about the opportunity that so many health innovators like you and your team, the impact to really be able to make a difference in somebody's lives during this time it's profound. And what I've seen is that it has rallied people and teams to work harder than ever before, to work faster than ever before, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Our team is, when we were pivoting and new stuff was coming on their plates, they've just responded incredibly.
Yeah.
And it's hard because you're in different work environments. You're more focused on home. There's stuff happening in the home setting. It's different for every person, right? So when you come into an office or you come into a meeting place or a lab or whatever it is, everybody is sort of in that moment, in that place, they're the same, right? But when you're now, everybody's in a virtual home environment, and you've got some people who might have young kids who you have to figure out how to sort of manage, and others who have parents that they're now having to take care of, and so we also created space that those things were okay, and people were able to know that they're not alone in those sort of unique pieces of their own personal experience, right?
Yeah, yeah. I say grace abounds with COVID, right? Like everything's okay, kind of anything goes. I had a team member that, she didn't tell me in real time. I found out a couple of days later because she didn't even know, but she's like, listen, she's like, a couple of days ago, I had a couple of Zoom meetings scheduled back to back. And by the time I was done, the kids had flooded the toilet.
Yeah.
They were trying to plunge it on their own. They were crying because they knew that something was not right and they were going to be in trouble. And this is why she's trying to work, right?
Yeah. No, it's everybody's sort of finding their groove and finding the new way, right? The new way it's going to be. And those things aren't going to get turned off right away, or some of them will never really change. I think it's going to be, in my family, I'm the only one who's in healthcare, and I've got relatives in the travel industry who are having a completely different experience. Relatives in retail who are having a different experience, and and friends, sort of all over the board. It's all you can do is, as you said, give as much grace as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit. Let's talk just a little bit about the financial piece as well. All of our listeners are trying to, learn from what other people are doing, and whether it's just giving insights into somebody else's experience with raising money, right? So, are you able to raise money right now? How are you how are you reshaping your just tactically your investor presentation, and positioning yourself? I like to call it like a COVID proof business, to be able to demonstrate that, now is the time to invest in companies like yours, not to stop investing. It's just, now's the opportunity. Just kind of give some color to what that experience has been like for you.
Yeah, no, it's a great, so I think that starts with a lot of listening. So I'm trying to listen a lot too, right, to the people that my own shareholders, colleagues, that I sort of try to stay in touch with and what their experiences are. And then, I think from a fundraising perspective, right, the stage of the company really determines what your story is and how you're talking and who you're talking to, right? And
Yeah.
we're a company that has been right on this sort of cusp. We've had, early stage institutional capital as part of our experience. And we've had, the sort of handful of high net worth or, personal investors bring us to the point that we're at right now. And I think in any downturn or any situation like this, you always have to be able to lean back on those, those core people who know you, because it's, in some cases impossible, but, much, much, much harder to actually build that rapport and the trust with new investors.
Yeah.
Or somebody that's new. So I think those are harder. We are right on this cusp of sort of moving to next level capital, right? We've been in a much larger raise, and so that requires, oftentimes is when you really jump to sort of next level institutional capital. And I think a lot of that capital is going to be on the sidelines for a window of time, unless, for one reason or another, they've got mandates. One of the things with institutional capital is time is money for them. And so if they're holding money, in some ways that can almost be as bad as making poor investments. Poor investments never the right thing to do, but holding money too long is also not good. And so they have an investment thesis and an investment plan that they're trying to execute, just like a business is executing. They're trying to execute towards that plan. And I think that has shifted some. And so you have to take that into consideration. I think, I think anybody who's trying to raise money in today's world, you have to be very aware that, so one of the things that happens, right, as a CEO of an early stage company is you can absolutely, it's very difficult not to be consumed with your own position, your own moment, your own set of things that have to happen, right?
Yeah.
You can forget, right, that you're really part of a much larger ecosystem. You're part of a financial ecosystem, right? So unless there's exit and pull on Wall Street, little companies like ours, even if you're never going to be the company that IPOs, all of those things are necessary to be able to create a moment for you. If you're a company that is at the stage where you've started selling your product and you're moving, your product can still be the greatest thing in the world. But if you were selling into surgical centers and they've stopped doing surgeries, your product doesn't have a market, right? So understanding where you are in the greater health system is also important. And so I've been doing a lot of calling and what I would call water cooler talk in today's world, right? We do it on a Zoom, but it's that water cooler talk around what other people are experiencing and what they're understanding. And the health industry as a whole is going to be pretty depressed, I think, for the next 12 to 24 months. That's going to affect most of the companies that are in our space. And so we have started thinking about how, like you said, our offering, highlighting what our offering can do immediately in this space, but also how we can prepare. So in other words, today it might even be easier to raise money for really good preparation to meet a need that is projected to be out there in 9 months versus raising money around scaling something that was ready to scale.
Yeah.
And right now is ready to scale. And so we focused a little bit more on our pipeline and conversations and how that pipeline meets needs in the future. But again, it's listening. The best as we change our deck, I'm talking to the people who I know will tell me how bad that deck is.
Yes, right, exactly.
And I'm talking to the people who will help me know, you really need to not say that, or you really need to say this differently, or that slide I couldn't understand at all, or it's important to get that feedback from multiple people.
So, I almost even consider what we're doing here very similar to even what you described. I like how you talked about the water cooler talk. I call it like a thinking partner. Like I need several thinking partners, and they can be part of my organization, but I need a set of thinking partners that are outside of my company as well. That's going to help me talk about things and kind of give a different perspective when they're not in it, right? I mean, it's that old adage of forest of the trees, but, I think that, what you describe is all of these different pivot paths that a CEO can take, and requires some kind of long thinking around who was I before, and really mapping that out, and then mapping out those different new paths you could take and figuring out what's going to be the best move. And I think what you described is, I like to say 10 years ago, we were building like annual plans, right?
Yeah.
5 years ago today, or I should say, 60 days ago, it was quarterly plans.
Yeah.
Now even the quarterly plans aren't, viable. Like now it's weekly, because just market conditions are changing so rapidly that, I don't think we could even set a 30-day plan and continue to execute that. So we're having to be more agile than we ever have been around all aspects of our company.
Yeah, no, it's wise. I think that's very wise. And I think one of the hardest things I deal with, and one of the reasons I'm constantly looking for other information, one of my friends he once told me a saying, like a sort of a truism of life that I never forgot.
Okay.
And it applies in so many aspects of my life, right? He said, David, by the end of the day, I've had just about all of me I can stand, right? And that's from a business perspective, that's just such a true thing, right? Because what's happened is, in this world, we've become much more self-centered or isolated, and it's been harder. And so I've tried actively to prevent that, because I know what I think, right? But what's important is to hear what others are thinking, so that I can sort of understand where I need to change. And you mentioned the time frame of how that's happening, and in these plans, one of the most difficult things in understanding what to change is not changing because of reaction, but actually doing proactive change for where you believe things will be, right? So today we're in a moment that is unprecedented. It is absolutely changing the way the world will be in the healthcare ecosystems forever. But what it is today is not what it will be in 12 months. And so if you pivot your company to try to be something today or tomorrow or next week or next month, that can have consequences if you're pivoting yourself out of where the market is going to sort of reset. And I think that's what is very, very difficult to do. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so true. So one of the things that I was talking about recently was just the impact where, you described and I don't, it's not surprising for many of us, is that, the number of companies, the number of hospitals, the number of physician practices, just the number of companies that are going to have to close their doors. And that is, I think, creating a lot of consolidation, a lot of mergers and acquisitions. And so as we think about this future pivot strategy, even that to me is something to analyze, right? Like, is the market opportunity changing, and how will that acquisition strategy impact, right? I can't sell to companies that don't exist anymore. So I think that in a lot of ways we might have a smaller customer segment because of some of this closing the door and, mergers and acquisitions that's going to inevitably take place.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's a great point. And, it's really scary when you think about the numbers that could actually be affecting. You hear things on the street, so to speak, and, it's very scary. But, our company, it was built around sort of three sort of core beliefs of what the coming healthcare world was going to be. And these aren't really my beliefs, they're not, I don't think they're unique to me. They get discussed a lot, but, it's one thing to sort of understand that they're there, and it's another to start moving towards acting as if they're there, right?
Yep.
And so those three things are, one is the consumerization of healthcare. The other is the decentralization of healthcare. So healthcare is, moving out from bigger or mid-sized facilities to the consumers in their home place. And then the third is what I like to call, anyways, the data democratization, right? So today we know that data is important, but eventually we're going to actually be making decisions based on data. And in the world, or many more decisions based on data than we do. And in the world that COVID-19 has created, you see all of those things in literally playing out in real time. Right, literally before our eyes. I was stunned, and this version of it has not expressed itself as well as what we had hoped, or I'm sure the people who had said it hoped. But when I heard of the announcement, right, that the testing for this pandemic was going to be taking place in the parking lots of Walmart and Google. Yeah. Or mediated by Google in the parking lots of Walmart, I literally was just, what an amazing expression of the consumerization of healthcare. Right? How healthcare is moving to where consumers live, right? Yeah. And rather than in the great hospitals, or rather than in even at the great companies, it stunned me. And then within a week of that announcement, right, they literally opened up the complete telehealth playbook. Yeah. So every facility, everything that could be billed, basically. I'm not giving reimbursement advice, by the way. Not quite that simple, but it was certainly really opened and expanded on the spot. And then last, data has both been, the lack of data today may be the most enduring story 20 years from now when we're looking back, right? Because I really believe that if the data had been centralized, if the data had been being collected, and it's all capable of being done, it's just not being done. These types of pandemics would be nipped in their bud way, way quicker than this one particularly was. So, yeah. Well,
and if I could, I think that the three trends that you just described are, and our listeners probably hear me say this quite often lately, that those are what I hear you describing is a big part of the silver lining in all of this, right? So the data democratization, the consumerization, the decentralization is stuff that a group of entities have been fighting for a very long time with very little success.
Yep.
And so if there's ever anything positive that could come from this, this being the catalyst or the springboard for increased adoption of these things that we know will improve and transform healthcare in a really, really powerful way.
Yep. No, I completely agree. And one of the great things about the human spirit is the ability to overcome extreme conflict and extreme burden and extreme tragedy through growth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that I believe anyways that's it's a defining component of who we are as humans, and that is absolutely in play as you described.
Yeah.
In the system itself, in the health system itself, that's happening right now.
So I've been reading a lot about these stories of survival and thriving companies from the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a beer drinker, but I read this story this week about a brewery who, mind you, at this point in time is during Prohibition. So they were selling something that was illegal to begin with.
Right.
And, when they described it, I mean, it's like all the odds were against them, right? So they were selling something that was illegal. There were over 1,000 breweries at the time, even in the legal market, right? And that, there were certain strategies and tactics that some of them took or applied in order to survive that. After the Great Depression, they ended up with 164 out of over 1,000. So, right. So that's a lot of what you're describing. Like, this is what we're anticipating. And what I thought was so remarkable is they said that the top 5 beer brands in were birthed during that period of time.
Yep.
And Yuengling was one of them. I don't remember the gentleman's first name, but whoever Yuengling, birthed this during that. And so, there's a lot of exciting opportunity in this, and it really forces us to really think differently about our businesses and the opportunities that are before us. There's so much mounting pressure as you describe. And I love just hearing these stories of all these overcomers that we can glean from in the past.
Absolutely. History, you always hope history, which will repeat itself, is repeating itself in the good way.
Right.
Rather than in negative ways, and certainly the ability to overcome. I mean, at the end of the day, being an entrepreneur is at least from my perspective, is it's relatively simple. It's being able to identify a need. It's having a passion about solving that need.
Yeah.
And it's about being able to execute to bring that solution to those who need it, right? If those 3 things occur, it's the same for business on Main Street as it is for, a cure for COVID-19.
Yeah.
Or, a cure for SARS-CoV-2. And, there's a lot of need right now. And when there's a lot of need, if you're focused on solving or curing or helping that need, there's a lot of opportunity. Yeah.
So David, as we wrap up here,
Sure.
what lessons learned or what advice do you have for your peers your fellow health innovators
Mm,
who are in the trenches right now trying to figure out
yeah,
how they're going to survive and thrive in this new COVID economy?
yeah. Well, uh, I don't know that I'm qualified to give them advice. Actually, I don't know what to do, but from a lessons learned, um, I think at least in my experience, it takes a lot of time to stay sort of people centered and people first, and I think this is a really good example of you know all of those relationships that you generate and all those relationships that you're um, gifted to have in how you're executing your business. That's what's going to carry you through these times. And so, for me, it has become the lesson I learned is that effort is worth it. And
Oof.
it's always, because sometimes it's hard, right? And maintaining those relationships. But today, sort of in this space that we're in now, the thing that is most valuable to me are those relationships, and the ones that you know you're able to rekindle. You're able to just being able to reach back out and touch. I've reached out to some friends or people that I haven't talked to for a while, right?
Yeah.
Are they okay or are they not? And um, those, that's what makes business successful,
Mm-hmm.
is people, and just value the people that
Yeah.
got in and around you to help you be successful in your business.
So very valuable advice, very, very valuable guidance that, I think that, we know intellectually that relationships are important,
Mhm.
but if we looked at our calendars
Mhm.
over the last 3 months, last 6 months,
Mhm.
I don't know if, I mean, I don't know what our calendar would say we value versus what we say we value. And so I think that there's a little bit of that heightened awareness that you just described
Mhm.
of to, make sure that what we do with our life and our time, our most precious
Yeah.
resource, is really more aligned with what we truly value deep inside, and not just a lot of all the surface stuff.
You said it better than I did. You should have answered my question.
No, 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 no.
That was wonderful. You did it really well. That's what I was trying to say. I just wasn't.
You said it. You said it. I was just repeating you. Oh, man. So, what an incredible conversation. I thank you so much for your openness and candidness about your experience, because, I know that our listeners, um, it's a real benefit when we can hear other people's story and we can realize that we're not all that different, and we're thinking and feeling and processing a lot of the same things. I think it's very encouraging and inspiring, to hear. So I appreciate you sharing your story and your with our listeners today.
I enjoyed it, and I enjoy hearing what others share with you.
Yeah.
So thank you for being there and being a voice out in this Zoom world.
Yes, right. Yes. So David, how can any of our listeners get a hold of you if someone wants to connect with you after the show?
Sure. Our website is www.moteram.com, and you can send it. Obviously, you can contact through that medium,
Perfect.
or my email address is my last name, Huizenga, Huizenga at moteramtechnologies.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's been great.
Thanks.
Thank Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and your attention. To save time and get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who's been sharing the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of COIQ.